The cabin was my sanctuary. Tucked deep into the pine woods, overlooking a still blue lake, it was the one place where silence felt alive. Birds stirred lazily in the branches, the morning sun cut sharp lines across the porch, and the only sound was the slow drip of coffee into my mug. I had built a routine here, early mornings, fishing at the dock, and evenings with nothing but the wind through the trees for company. It was peaceful. It was mine. That peace cracked the moment I heard the crunch of gravel. Tires, slow but deliberate, rolled up my private driveway. My first instinct was irritation. Delivery trucks sometimes took wrong turns. But when I stepped out onto the porch, mug in hand, the sight that greeted me was something else entirely. A gleaming black SUV pulled up like it was arriving for an appointment. The driver's door opened, and out stepped a woman in a sharp navy blazer, her heels clicking against the stones. She carried a clipboard tucked under one arm, her smile wide and professional, rehearsed. Behind her, two couples climbed out, one younger, whispering to each other with excitement, the other older, moving with the slow assurance of people ready to spend serious money. They looked at my cabin the way people look at a prize up for auction. One man pointed toward the lake view, the woman beside him whispered, "Oh, it's perfect." My stomach tightened. The woman in the blazer approached, waving as if she belonged there. "Good morning. We're here for the showing. Isn't this just a lovely property?" I blinked. Showing? My mind stumbled over the word. "Excuse me?" She gestured casually at the cabin. "This one." The cabin. "We're scheduled to tour the property today. It's listed as available. I'm with Cedar Ridge Realty." She flipped her clipboard to show me glossy brochures. My cabin was on the cover, complete with stage photos I had never seen before. And in bold letters, "For sale, cozy lakeside cabin." My grip tightened around the mug. "This property isn't for sale," I said flatly. Her expression didn't shift. Not a hint of embarrassment, just a polished smile that had closed 100 deals. "Oh, I'm sure there's just a small miscommunication. The Homeowners Association contacted us directly and authorized the listing. We've had a lot of interest already. If you'd like, we can schedule a formal walkthrough after today's showing." The words hit me like a slap. HOA? Authorized? My jaw locked as I scanned the couples who were still wandering closer, craning their necks, peeking at the porch, the dock, even the firewood stacked by the shed. I stepped down the porch steps and planted myself in the driveway, a wall between them and my home. Nobody is stepping inside. This is my property. I never listed it. I don't know what game the HOA thinks it's playing, but this cabin isn't for sale. Not today, not ever. The woman's smile faltered just slightly, the mask slipping long enough for me to catch a flicker of annoyance. But then she straightened, her eyes sharp, defiant. "Sir, with all due respect, the association made it very clear." "Get off my land," I cut her off, my voice echoing against the trees. The couples hesitated. One of them muttered something about wasting their time. The younger pair shuffled awkwardly, glancing between us like they weren't sure who to believe. Finally, the realtor pursed her lips, gave a tight nod, and motioned toward the SUV. They left in a swirl of dust and exhaust, but the damage was already done. My sanctuary had been violated. My privacy, invaded. And as I watched their car disappear down the gravel road, I knew with a cold certainty this wasn't just a mistake. This was war. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that realtor's smile, those couples peering at my porch as if it were already theirs. My mind kept circling back to one thing, the HOA. They weren't supposed to have any authority over my cabin. My deed was ironclad, the property line well marked. Yet somehow, they had given themselves permission to sell what didn't belong to them. By morning, I was done waiting. I drove straight into town, past the general store, and pulled into the HOA's pristine little office. Their building was everything mine wasn't: freshly painted siding, trimmed hedges, a flagpole standing tall as if patriotism excused arrogance. Inside, The air smelled like lemon cleaner and cheap coffee. A receptionist with a polite but vacant smile greeted me, as if she already knew why I was there. "Mr. Walker, right? One moment, please. Mrs. Kensington will see you shortly." I stiffened at the name. Veronica Kensington, HOA president. She was a local legend, not for good reasons. Her reputation was built on rules, fines, and intimidation. If you left a garbage can out 1 hour past pickup, you got a letter. Paint your shutters the wrong shade of green? You got a fine. People tolerated her because she had connections and wasn't afraid to swing them like a hammer. When I was ushered into her office, she was already waiting behind a wide oak desk, her posture perfect, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. "Mr. Walker," she said, as if greeting an old friend. "I assume you're here about the showing?" "Showing?" I dropped the glossy brochure she'd authorized onto her desk. "You mean the unauthorized attempt to sell my cabin?" She didn't even flinch. Instead, she laced her fingers together and leaned forward slightly. "Now, let's not overreact. You've owned that cabin for years, but you don't exactly use it full-time. We had reason to believe you were open to selling, and as part of our efforts to maintain community values, we decided to be proactive." My jaw tightened. "Proactive? You trespassed on my property and invited strangers to walk through my home. That's not proactive, it's illegal." Her smile thinned. "Legality is a matter of interpretation. The association charter gives us broad discretion when it comes to property management. And frankly, Mr. Walker, a neglected cabin doesn't reflect well on the neighborhood. We simply thought you might appreciate assistance in finding the right buyers." I stared at her, stunned by the audacity. She spoke as if she were doing me a favor, as if orchestrating a sale behind my back was an act of charity. "Let me be clear," I said, my voice low but sharp. "This cabin is not for sale. Not by me, not by you, not by anyone. If you, or your realtor, set foot on my property again, I won't be so polite next time." Her eyes narrowed, just slightly. The room went quiet. Then, with that same infuriating calm, she said, "We'll see." I left the office with my pulse pounding in my ears. The war I'd felt brewing wasn't just paranoia. Veronica Kensington had declared it out loud. And something told me she wasn't planning to lose. When I pulled back into my driveway that afternoon, I didn't see my cabin the same way anymore. The cedar logs, the porch swing, even the stone chimney, they no longer looked like the pieces of a sanctuary. They looked like targets. The thought of strangers walking across my porch, whispering about open-concept kitchens and lakefront potential, burned like acid in my stomach. That was the moment I decided the rules of engagement had changed. I threw open the shed and dragged out my old iron gate from where it had sat for years. Heavy, rusted, but still solid. I had installed it once before during construction, then taken it down when I thought neighbors could be trusted. Now I was going back up, this time to stay. Sweat soaked my shirt as I worked through the afternoon. The clang of metal posts driving into the gravel echoed across the trees, each strike a promise. I wrapped thick chains around the hinges, locked them tight with a heavy-duty padlock, the kind that didn't break without a fight. When I was done, the entrance to my driveway looked less like a welcome and more like a fortress. But I didn't stop there. I grabbed a piece of plywood, painted it white, and in bold red letters I scrawled, "Private property, not for sale, trespassers will be prosecuted." The paint bled slightly into the wood, giving the words a jagged, angry look. Perfect. I bolted the sign right onto the gate where nobody could miss it. By the time I stepped back, evening light was filtering through the trees, casting long shadows across the locked entrance. My hands shook, not from exhaustion but from adrenaline. It felt good, taking control, reclaiming what was mine. But the silence didn't last. Around 7 o'clock, just as the crickets began their nightly chorus, headlights flared down the road. A silver sedan slowed to a stop in front of my new gate. For a moment, it just idled there, engine humming. Then the driver's side window rolled down, and a camera flash burst across the dark. They were photographing my gate. I stormed down the driveway until I stood just beyond the locked barrier. "Can I help you?" I called, my voice carrying across the quiet. The figure in the car lowered the camera. It was one of the HOA board members, a man named Stevens. He had the nervous energy of a lapdog, always running errands for Veronica. "Just documenting," he said coolly. "The association will want to review this obstruction." "Obstruction?" I barked out a laugh. "This is called private property. You tell your boss the showings are over. The cabin isn't for sale, and anyone who steps foot past this gate will regret it." Stevens didn't argue. He just gave me a stiff smile, snapped one more picture, and drove off into the night. As his taillights disappeared, a chill settled over me. Locking the gate hadn't ended anything. It had only fired the first shot. The next morning, I woke to the sound of gravel crunching outside my gate. My stomach tightened before I even pulled the curtain back. Sure enough, parked just beyond the barrier was a shiny black SUV with a magnetic decal on the door, Kensington Realty Group. The realtor was back. She stepped out like she owned the place, heels clicking against the road, sunglasses perched on her head, hair perfect even in the morning humidity. I recognized her from yesterday's ambush, sharp suit, fake smile, clipboard tucked under one arm. Except this time, she wasn't pretending to be polite. Her eyes scanned my new gate and my bold red-lettered sign. I half expected her to laugh. Instead, she pulled out her phone, snapped photos, and then muttered into her Bluetooth headset like she was giving a field report. I didn't give her the satisfaction of watching from the window. I marched down the driveway until I stood just inside the locked barrier. "You're trespassing," I said, my voice steady even as my fists clenched. She gave me a bright, mocking smile. "I'm on the road, Mr. Walker. Perfectly public. Just doing my job. Your job is to sell houses people actually want to sell. This one isn't." I jabbed a finger at the sign. "You read that, didn't you?" Her smile didn't falter. "Signs don't change contracts." That stopped me cold. "What contract?" She flipped a page on her clipboard, holding it up like a prize. The HOA provided a listing agreement. Standard paperwork. Authorization to show and market the property. Everything signed and sealed. My blood went cold. "Signed by who?" Her smirk deepened. "By the association, of course. They told me the owner was absent, unresponsive, and potentially interested in selling. I'm just following instructions." I felt a dangerous heat rising in my chest. "The HOA has no legal right to sell my land. You know that." Her tone turned icy. "What I know is, this neighborhood values progress. Your little cabin? It's an eyesore to them. You can chain it up, hang signs, shout all you want. But sooner or later, progress wins." She turned to leave, snapping a few final photos of my gate, my locks, even me standing there like some outlaw guarding a fort. The SUV door slammed, the engine roared, and she sped off, dust swirling in her wake. I stood there long after she was gone, staring at the road she'd vanished down. My sign looked flimsy now. My gate, too. It wasn't just wood and metal anymore, it was a challenge. And the realtor had just made it clear, the HOA wasn't bluffing. They weren't just testing my patience. They were moving to take my home. And if they thought I'd roll over, they had no idea who they were dealing with. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with a single bulb burning overhead, staring at the stack of mail I hadn't touched in days. Most of it was junk, credit card offers, subscription flyers, HOA newsletters I usually tossed without reading. But now, every envelope looked like a loaded weapon. I tore into the one-stamped HOA management office. Inside was a letter typed in stiff legalese. Notice of pending property sale. The association has deemed your cabin available for resale in accordance with community improvement policies. All documents have been filed with Kensington Realty Group. Failure to comply may result in fines, liens, or legal enforcement. Attached was a photocopy of what they claimed was my listing agreement. My name was there, printed neatly at the bottom. And next to it, a signature, my signature. Except it wasn't mine. The loops, the angles, even the way the R in my last name curled, it was close. Too close. Whoever had forged it had studied my handwriting carefully. I felt my chest tighten. This wasn't just arrogance anymore. This was criminal. I shoved back from the table, pacing the cabin like a caged animal. They were manufacturing paperwork to take what wasn't theirs. And if the realtor waved this around in the right office, with the right lawyer, I could end up fighting to prove I hadn't agreed to sell my own land. The phone buzzed. Unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Mr. Walker, the realtor's voice purred on the line. I wanted to confirm you received the paperwork. Things will move quickly now. You don't want to make this harder than it has to be. My jaw clenched. That contract is a forgery. A small pause, then a laugh. Big words. Do you really want to drag this into court? The association has more resources than you could ever imagine. Lawyers, money, influence. All you have is, what? Chains and a painted sign? Her confidence was like gasoline poured on a fire. What I have, I said slowly, is the deed. The original, notarized, locked in a safe. And if you think for 1 second I'm going to let you and your HOA cronies steal what's mine, you're in for the fight of your life. Her tone shifted, sharp and cold. Careful, Mr. Walker. People who fight progress often get buried by it. The line went dead. I stood there in silence, phone still pressed to my ear, the weight of her threat settling into the room. The game had escalated. They weren't bluffing anymore. I walked to the safe tucked behind the old bookshelf, spun the dial, and pulled out the leather folder containing my deed. I traced my finger across the embossed seal, the county clerk's stamp, the ink faded but unbroken. This was real. And as long as I held it, I had the weapon I needed. The HOA had fired their shot with forged papers. Now it was my turn to strike back. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that forged signature staring back at me, an insult carved onto paper. The HOA had crossed a line, and now it was my turn to move the pieces. By dawn, I had a plan. First, I gathered evidence. I spread everything across the table, the fake contract, the HOA letter, the realtor's business card, even the photos I'd taken of her car at my gate. I scanned them all into my laptop, labeling each file like ammunition in a war chest. Then I pulled out my phone and called an old friend. Mitchell, it's Walker. You still working fraud cases? On the other end, Mitchell's voice was tired but sharp. Yeah. Why? You finally get yourself in trouble? Not me, I said. The HOA. They forged my signature on a real estate contract. I need an expert opinion, fast. There was silence, then a low whistle. That's federal, you know. Wire fraud, mail fraud, real estate fraud, it's not small potatoes. Send me everything. Relief washed over me. I wasn't crazy, this wasn't just a petty neighborhood feud anymore. This was a crime. But I didn't stop there. I printed flyers with a bold headline, warning, fraudulent sale attempt. Below it, I listed the realtor's name, the HOA president's name, and a copy of my deed. At the bottom, in red ink, this property is not for sale. Trespassers will be prosecuted. By noon, those flyers were stapled to every telephone pole within 3 miles. If the HOA wanted to paint me as a recluse or a pushover, I'd show the entire town the truth before they could spin their lies. That evening, I parked my truck at the local diner, the kind of place where gossip traveled faster than the coffee pot. I walked in, slapped one of the flyers on the community bulletin board, and let it hang where everyone could see. Conversation stopped. Heads turned. People stared at me, then at the flyer, then back at me. Is this real? A man asked, pointing to the word forgery. Dead real, I said loud enough for everyone to hear. The HOA is trying to sell my cabin with a fake contract. And if they can do it to me, they can do it to anyone in this town. The murmur of voices grew into a rumble. Some shook their heads. Others muttered curses about the HOA. The seed of doubt had been planted, and it was spreading fast. When I drove back to my cabin that night, I noticed something new at the gate. Someone had slipped a folded note between the chains. I pulled it free, unfolded it under the porch light. In messy block letters, it read, "You're making enemies. Be careful where you sleep." I stared at the paper, pulse hammering. This wasn't just intimidation anymore. This was war. 2 days passed after the threat slipped into my gate. I barely slept, always half expecting headlights to sweep across the cabin windows at night. Every creak of the floorboards, every snap of a branch outside set my nerves on edge. On the third morning, just as I poured coffee into my mug, I heard tires crunching over gravel. A county patrol SUV rolled up to the gate, lights flashing. My stomach dropped. Sheriff Dalton stepped out, his wide-brimmed hat low against the sun. He was a man I'd seen a dozen times at town meetings, steady, no nonsense. But today, his expression was unreadable. "Morning, Walker," he called through the gate. "We need to talk." I set my mug down on the porch railing, arms crossed. "What about?" He held up a folder. "Got a complaint from the HOA. Says you're illegally blocking access to community property and threatening potential buyers. They also gave me this." He slid a sheet of paper through the bars of the gate. "My forged contract." Again. I clenched my jaw. "That's a fake. They forged my signature." Dalton studied me, then the paper. "They seem real sure it's legit. Even had a notary stamp." "Notary stamp doesn't mean squat if it's falsified," I snapped. "I've got the original deed, with the county clerk's seal." "You want to see it?" His eyes narrowed. "Bring it." I disappeared inside, retrieved the leather folder, and returned. I held the deed against the bars while he examined every inch of it, the seal, the signatures, the date. After a long silence, he let out a slow exhale. "Well," he said, "this looks a hell of a lot more authentic than what they showed me." He folded the forged contract and tucked it back into his folder. "I'll log this, but you've stirred up a hornet's nest, Walker. They're leaning on me hard to enforce their claims. You sure you want to keep pushing?" I met his gaze. "Dalton, if they can take my cabin with a fake contract, they can take anybody's land. You want to live in a county run by paper criminals?" He studied me for a long moment, then gave a curt nod. "Keep your paperwork safe. But watch yourself. HOA's got friends in high places. Some of them don't care about laws as much as money." He climbed back into his SUV and drove off, leaving dust hanging in the air. For a moment, I let myself breathe. At least Dalton wasn't fully against me. But the fact that the HOA had managed to drag law enforcement out here with forged documents meant they were getting desperate and dangerous. As I gathered my papers back into the safe, I noticed something chilling. The folder the sheriff handed me back still smelled faintly of expensive perfume. Veronica's perfume. She'd been the one to deliver that evidence. And if she was bold enough to hand fake documents to law enforcement, she was capable of anything. I woke Saturday morning to the sound of laughter. Not the kind you hear in the woods, no campfire or kids splashing in the creek. This was sharp, echoing, out of place. I pulled on my boots and stepped onto the porch. My blood ran cold. A cluster of cars lined the gravel road outside my locked gate, sedans, SUVs, even a shiny black Mercedes. And beyond the gate, on my land, a balloon tied to a stake bobbed in the breeze. On it, in bright letters, "Open House, Cabin for Sale." I gripped the railing so tight my knuckles went white. Through the trees I could see her, Veronica, in a tailored red jacket, waving her arms dramatically as she led a small group of strangers up my driveway. They were smiling, pointing at my cabin as if they were already picking out curtains. "This can't be real," I muttered. I marched down to the gate, unlocked the chain, and stormed up the path. My boots crunched loud enough to turn heads. "Hey!" My voice cracked through the air like a gunshot. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" The group froze. A couple clutching lattes glanced at each other nervously. The realtor gave a thin, professional smile. "Mr. Walker," she said smoothly, "we're holding a showing. These buyers are very interested in your property." "Interested in my property?" I barked. "This is my home, not a listing. Get off my land now." One man chuckled awkwardly. "Is this part of the act? Like some kind of rustic roleplay?" "It's not a damn act," I snapped. "You're trespassing. All of you. Out." The smiles melted. Murmurs rippled through the group as they realized this wasn't a sales gimmick. Some shuffled back toward the gate. But Veronica didn't move. She stood tall, arms folded, eyes burning into me. "You're making yourself look unstable," she said coldly. "These people came here in good faith, expecting a tour. Instead, they find a paranoid man shouting in the woods. Do you think that helps your case?" I stepped closer until we were eye to eye. "Forgery. Trespassing. Fraud. That's your case, Veronica. And I've already started sharing it with the town." Her smile twitched, the first crack in her polished armor. She leaned in just enough for only me to hear. "Careful, Walker. The more noise you make, the harder you'll fall. And when you do, no one will believe you're the victim." I straightened, raising my voice so everyone could hear. "This cabin is not for sale. The HOA forged documents to make it look like it is. You've all been lied to. Now, I suggest you leave before I call the sheriff back out here." That did it. The last of the group turned and hurried down the path, muttering about lawsuits and wasted time. Cars started one by one, gravel spitting as they pulled away. Soon, only Veronica and I stood there, facing each other in the silence of the woods. Finally, she smirked. "You can chase buyers away, but you can't chase me. I always close the deal." And with that, she pivoted on her heels and strode off, heels clicking like gunshots. I stood there, my heart hammering, realizing the truth, she wasn't bluffing. This was just her opening move. By Monday morning, I knew I couldn't just play defense anymore. Veronica had staged an open house on my land. The HOA had dragged the sheriff out here with forged papers. If I didn't flip the narrative, they'd bury me in lies. So I went on offense. I drove to the county seat, my deed folder strapped in the passenger seat like a weapon. The clerk's office was quiet, rows of dusty binders, humming fluorescent lights. Mrs. Carter, the senior clerk, looked up from her desk. "Well, if it isn't Walker. Heard there's some HOA drama up at your place," she said knowingly. "Drama's one word," I replied, sliding my deed across the counter. "But this is the truth. And someone is trying to erase it." Her brow furrowed as she flipped through the pages. "This is the original deed. Seal's clean. No dispute here. Then explain why the HOA has a contract with my forged signature. They're trying to sell my cabin out from under me." Her face hardened. "Forgery is a felony. If they filed anything false with us, that's a crime." She opened her computer, clicking fast. "Give me names." I listed them: Veronica Price, HOA president; Helen Marsh, the realtor; their so-called notary. Carter typed, lips pursed, then looked up. "There's no record of any transfer." Which means, she tapped her screen. Whatever contract they've been waiting around is off the books. Pure fabrication. A surge of relief coursed through me, but it was short-lived. Because Carter leaned closer and whispered, "You didn't hear it from me, but Veronica's been cozy with Councilman Hayes. He's been pushing zoning changes that just so happen to benefit her group. If she convinces him to file something official, your cabin could get tied up in red tape for years. My gut twisted. This wasn't just HOA pettiness anymore, it was politics. That night, I took the next step. I wrote everything down: the forged contract, the trespassing, the open house ambush. I scanned my deed, photos of the gate, even the perfume-scented letter. Then I posted it all online, on the local forum where every rancher, logger, and shop owner swapped news. The headline I wrote was blunt: HOA trying to sell my cabin without consent, proof inside. Within an hour, comments flooded in. They tried something similar to me last year. Veronica's been after land for months. Walker's got receipts. This is real. By midnight, my post had gone viral, at least by small-town standards. The HOA's reputation was crumbling in real time. And then came the text message. From an unknown number. You think the internet will save you? Cute. Enjoy your 15 minutes, Walker. After that, you'll wish you'd kept quiet. I stared at the screen, pulse pounding. Veronica wasn't just rattled, she was furious. Which meant my counterstrike had worked. But it also meant the war had only just begun. The town hall was packed that night. Folding chairs scraped, voices buzzed, camera phones were raised high. Word of my post had spread like wildfire, and the council had no choice but to put HOA complaint number 472 on the official agenda. I sat in the front row, deed folder on my lap. Behind me, half the town showed up: neighbors who'd been fined for bird feeders, ranchers who'd been harassed about their barns, shop owners Veronica had bullied. Then the doors swung open. Veronica marched in with her lawyer at her side, chin high, a crimson blazer flashing like battle armor. Helen the Realtor followed, lips tight. Even Councilman Hayes sat with them, pretending neutrality but looking smug. The chairwoman banged her gavel. Let's proceed. Mr. Walker, you've alleged serious misconduct by the HOA. Present your evidence. My pulse hammered, but I stood tall. I opened the folder, lifted my deed high, and spoke loud enough to cut through the whispers. This cabin is mine. Deeded legally 20 years ago. Yet the HOA forged documents claiming they could sell it. They trespassed, vandalized, even staged an open house on my land. I laid out the proof: copies of the fake contract, photos of the open house sign, timestamps from security cameras. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The lawyer tried to object, but I cut him off. And if you don't believe me, ask the county clerk's office. They confirmed it: no transfer ever filed. Which means these documents are nothing but fraud. All eyes turned to Veronica. She smiled coolly, but her knuckles whitened against the table. Councilman Hayes leaned forward. These are bold accusations. Why would the HOA engage in something so reckless? That's why I played my ace. I pulled out one last page, a zoning proposal draft with Hayes' signature. Because this councilman stood to profit. With my land under HOA control, he could rezone and flip parcels for development. They weren't just stealing my cabin. They were lining pockets. The room erupted. Shouts, boos, phones flashing. Hayes went pale. The chairwoman slammed her gavel. Order! Order! Veronica shot to her feet, voice sharp. Lies! This man is unstable, dangerous, he threatened me. But her lawyer tugged her sleeve too late. From the back row, Sheriff Daniels stood. His voice was steady, carrying above the chaos. We already opened an investigation into this matter. Forgery. Fraud. Conspiracy to commit real estate theft. Ms. Price, Ms. Marsh, Councilman Hayes, you'll all be coming with me. Gasps turned into cheers. People stood, clapping, stomping. Veronica's mask cracked at last, her smirk gone, her eyes wide as the deputies stepped forward. You can't do this, she hissed, heels scraping as they cuffed her. This town needs me. No, I said quietly, watching her being led away. This town needs honesty. As the gavel banged one last time, I felt the weight lift from my chest. My cabin was safe. The HOA's reign of terror was over. And for the first time in years, the woods around me felt like home again.